Welcome to the first episode of D2's Odyssey of Pages. This is a very new channel. I just started. D2 is my gamer tag. My name is actually Tony, but you'll hear me refer to myself as D2 or Don Meister. Now and then, new channel I'm starting. This will be the first episode, and hopefully not the last, for books. I've been a not so avid reader over the last couple of decades, but about a year ago, actually in July, after taking probably 6 months off from reading, of which I had gotten into like a 6 month run before that, beginning of January 2023 through July 2023, I was looking back at my reading history. I read probably half a dozen books and was getting in a groove. And then for some unexplained reason, I quit reading until the next year. And then July of last year, 2024, I kicked off a whole new round of reading and stuck with it this time. And a year later, I have gone through 20 books, thinking about how I like to create things. I thought, hey, how about I dabble with some more YouTube? I have a channel on astrophotography, which I will have linked in case you're into that. More technical stuff there. But this channel is going to be all about reading. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet, but I'm going to kick it off with a tier rating of the 20 books I've read over the last year. And at the end, I'm going to pick one book that if I could only read one, which one would it have been? All right, so before we do that, let's talk about the books I like to read. The bookshelf behind me is my daughter's bookshelf. So these are not my books. But I do challenge myself to read one she recommends every once in a while, which you'll see in this set. My main diet of books includes military history. I'm mesmerized with being on the ground in memoirs, particularly, and reliving the horrors of war with these folks, and I'm just fascinated at how they were able to do that and survive and get through those tragic times. Second genre I love, sci-fi. Various types, not too super heavy, but definitely spans light to more heavy duty from time to time. Third up, fantasies. Love fantasy books of various types. The other thing I like is classic books. We'll be getting back to more classics. I read Moby Dick in 2012. I actually thought it was pretty good. I don't know why I liked it so much, but a lot of people hate it. So you see classic books in here. I'm also not what I'd consider a fast reader. Not slow, but not fast. So the number of books I would typically cover is not to the extent you would see of some of the YouTubers on here who are just avid readers and spending all of their time doing that. I also don't tend to agree with the ratings that a lot of people give the books I read. I do have a strong bias on military history, especially memoirs. They're near and dear to me. I have differing opinions on a lot of the sci-fi I read. My wife does not agree with like the ratings that I have for books, the same books that we read in a lot of cases, but I still appreciate most of the books I read, even if I don't rate them as high as the others. Any book I read all the way through, I would probably recommend someone to read. Even if it's 3 stars on my scale, I would say it was worth reading. So if you watch my videos as I produce them and you disagree with something, don't get too excited. Just my opinion. I know that it could vary wildly from somebody else's, but just know I probably don't share the same opinion as a lot of people on some of these books, and I'm also heavily biased on the military history stuff. So take that into account when watching anything on here, and just know that I truly look at it from how much I enjoy reading the book, just outright. And I don't worry about the pressure of what other people think about my opinions of the books. And I'll also be staying away from spoilers as much as possible, staying away from political messaging of any type as much as possible. So you don't have to worry about this. This is just purely a fun, what do I like to read? What do I think of books? Maybe doing rankings every once in a while on different things. So if you like that, tune in. And since it's a brand new channel, be one of the first to subscribe. Now's the time. You can look back and once I have 500,000 subscribers and say I was one of the first. Without further ado, let's get to the computer rating screen and kick off the rankings. All right, so here we are in the rating system. I have all the books I read last year at the bottom in the order that I read them. On the left side, we have the tiering I'm going to use. We're using S through E for the actual ratings. So all the books will go there. E means I wouldn't recommend it. Otherwise, even a D, don't get caught up on the D as not an educational scale. It's just a rating scale. I would still recommend reading it, even at a D rating. 3 stars and up, worth reading. So everything will get rated to that. And then at the end, the S plus will be the one book that if I could only read one from the past year, which book would it have been? So we'll put that up there. Some of these books, especially the ones I read early on, like last year, mid-year, I don't recall quite as well the details, and that's normal for me. Yeah, ask my wife. I don't remember the movie we watched, 3 months ago, not alone the details of a book from a year ago. But having said that, I'm going to do my best. And also, if I were to re-rate these with other books later on, I could quite easily put some of these into a different place than I'm putting them in now. So if I do that, don't hold it against me. So first up, Dune, S tier. So before I read Dune, I read the prequel to this, which Herbert's son wrote later on, called House Atreides. And whereas I don't think it's as good as Dune by a lot, I will say that I'm glad I read it before Dune because it gave a lot of backstory to the houses and leading into Dune itself. Glad I did that. Not necessarily what I recommend, because like I said, you may not enjoy those as much. Herbert's son wrote 3 different books for the various houses, and I've only read the one. Next up, Soldat, first military history book for this series. And this is a memoir of a German soldier on the Eastern Front, and your typical layout of their exploits in the military or in the war on the Eastern Front. I don't remember this one as well, which is one of the reasons it's a C. I've read a lot of memoirs. Some of these kind of blend together over time, but I do know that from my notes especially that I have this a C. Next up, In Deadly Combat. This one is also a German soldier, officer in particular, and what's unique about this story is they were closer to some of the leaders and on the Eastern Front, and they went all the way through to Moscow and then retreated back to Berlin through the classic story of that Eastern Front war. And it was interesting to see the mindset of this officer, what they were thinking about, and what was important to them, especially during the retreat to Berlin. Metamorphosis, one of my daughter's recommendations, A tier. Now, this is a very unique book. I won't even say what it's about. It's a short read. Kafka is always a very unique writer, and this is just a strange, very strange story. And my daughter was so excited to get me to read this, but I did enjoy it. A tier. Next up, Brandon Sanderson, fantasy book, The Way of Kings. Another S tier book. Now, this one I almost put to A tier, and I know that a lot of people say that this book is a build up for the next book in the series and those after, and it generally doesn't get as high ratings as some of the other Sanderson books in the series. I really enjoyed it. I think it's S tier. The writing's fantastic. Multiple storylines going on that are connected in this. This is right around 1,000 pages, so you got to buckle down if you're not a fast reader. But it was enjoyable the entire way. Well worth it. Another book, The Count of Monte Cristo. This is A tier. Now, this could easily have gone either direction from A for me. There's times in the books where I felt like I was struggling to keep up with all the complexity of everything that they had going in the storyline, especially with all the different names that had similar pronunciations. And I started reading the book, and then I had it as a library book, actually, and I had to turn it back in. Couldn't renew it. Switched over to the audiobook that I had, and I was losing contact in the audiobook. I don't do well with audiobooks. So then I got the library book again and reconnected by reading the actual pages. And then everything kind of came back online for me about halfway into the book when I did that. And I loved it. There's a couple of really, really good scenes, and they do tie into the recent movie was made, but the movie is completely different. I won't spoil anything here, but I would say this book is definitely a read. This is like 1,200 and some pages. Took me a long time. This is when I was still settling in and being focused on reading regularly last year. Love that book. Could have been S tier, but I'm trying to be critical here. Next up, Aztec Blood. This is another book my daughter bought me for Christmas, and I really enjoyed the book. I hesitated making it C tier, thinking B, but deep down, it's really not as much my style of book, which is why I ranked it a little bit lower than some of my other ones, but thoroughly enjoyed it. Next up, military history. Once again, D-Day. This is the first S-tier military history. Now, Ambrose, I've read a lot of Ambrose's books. A few of them come across to me as dry history, but most of his books don't. His books come off as stories. He really is able to put you in the shoes, so to speak, of the people on the ground. It tells their stories. You really feel like you're there. I love the way that he pulls it all together. Now, he does do the typical, build up of what all the different countries were doing before the war started and the positioning from the leaders and all that. But he does it in a way that, for me, is not the boring chronological history like you get in typical education books. So that leads into the actual story from different perspectives of people on the beachhead and further inland, and plays out like fantastic writing of it. Next up, we have, switching back to sci-fi, Andy Weir's Hail Mary. Now, this one is another one I see people all over the board with the ratings. And for me, just the enjoyment alone of it puts it at an A. I just enjoyed the story. I didn't want to put it down. When I don't want to put a book down, that elevates it already. I'd say the writing itself would probably be more of a B for me, just because it's a lot simpler than some of the other books and not necessarily unique in writing. But enjoyment alone, love the story, and that made it an A. All right, our next is Foundation. First book in the trilogy by Asimov. And I don't know if this might be the first Asimov book I've ever read. I find that surprising to think that, but it might be. Love this book. And each one of these is like 250 pages. Didn't want to put it down. And super intriguing, mysterious, great story, unique, traditional sci-fi that you can't wait to sink your teeth into. So that's an S tier. Next up, we have Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Now, I'm torn by this one. I wanted to rate it higher, but when I took a step back from after reading it, I did enjoy the book. First, I was going to have it as an A, but then when I just asked myself, I just didn't enjoy it as much as the books above it. Parts of it were better than others, but I just, for whatever reason, didn't resonate with me as much as I hoped it would. Still love the book. 4 stars. Pretty strong. Next up, Your Utopia. This is a book my son recommended to me that he had. And it's a collection of short stories. And I will say, even though I rate this a C, there are some stories in here that I would put at A, maybe even stronger. And there's, a couple that I would put lower. So when I take a step back on this one, I feel like overall, really enjoyed the book, but the weight of those parts that were A were not strong enough to pull it up. But did pull it up from, I'd say, more average for me. This is not typically my style of book. So the other part of this is, I'm heavily biased to the military history, fantasy, sci-fi genres, and maybe traditional classics a little bit. So if you like this book, don't be disheartened. I still like the book, and just not so much my style. Next up, Pegasus Bridge. It's an A. Another Ambrose book, a very similar style writing as D-Day, but a very unique situation around this target, this bridge that the mission revolves around. And I won't, give any spoilers there, but this one is like more directly connected to the individuals on the ground at this mission. I mean, this is like a true story. I don't know how much of it's dramatized, but these are from the actual people there, those who died, those who made the mission possible. Resonated well with me in terms of the style of writing I like for military history. Next up, we have, is it Camus? Another recommendation from my daughter, another short book, and that is The Stranger. I really like this book. Another very unique, and Kafka's very unique, Camus very unique. This book was kind of depressing, and maybe that's why I didn't rate it as high. I mean, for me, it just felt like it kind of pulled me down, and I don't think that's the intent of the book, but for whatever reason, that's how I felt afterwards. So I didn't enjoy it as much as some of the others. I mean, again, I'm going off my enjoyment meter. My enjoyment meter sitting at about a B on that. Still 4 stars. That's very strong. Next up, we have Foundation and Empire. Another S tier, second book in the Foundation series. Another one that I just couldn't put down. And it follows right in step with the first Foundation book and continues the story. And I absolutely loved it. I also love these. I think these are the first edition covers for the Foundation series here. Love the old cover art. And because I couldn't put that book down, I usually try to switch genres between books. And I was so into the series at this point that the next book was Second Foundation, which is the third book in the series and the trilogy. I love this one as well. All 3 of these, read as one book. It's fantastic. Some people might say no, go slower. Got your opinion. You're right to it. All right, so switching gears, military history. I'm not as much of a fan of Civil War books as I am of other military history time periods, but I had read the Killer Angels book by Michael Shara. I think it's Shara. And I had read that, several years ago. I really liked that book. When I figured out that ended up being the second book in a trilogy after Jeff Shara picked up the writing after his father, he wrote the bookends to Killer Angels, and the first was Gods and Generals. And Gods and Generals is before the Civil War up through Gettysburg. And then Killer Angels covers Gettysburg. And then supposedly the third book, Jeff Shara, the son, also wrote, which is called The Last Full Measure, is after Gettysburg, I believe, through the end of the war. I did not like this book. Not the writer that his father is, in my opinion. However, if I have read this book by itself and it was a standalone book, this would probably be an E for me. But for me, I know there's some people that love this book, and I'm not going to do that though. I'm actually going to I should put it at a D, because I feel like if you're going to read, you can read Killer Angels standalone and not read the other two. But if you want to read the whole three, I feel like as a set with Killer Angels in there, this ends up being between a D and an E. So I'm going to leave it right on the line and cheat a little bit. If you are going to read the whole set, feel like it'll maybe be a D, or if you love this type of writing, it'll be hopefully better than that. But for me, I definitely would not reread it, and I would not read it as a standalone. All right, next up, I, Robot. All right, this one, I think I have going back and forth between S and A. I like the story of iRobot. I don't think the writing is as strong as other Asimov books. I mean, this one for me goes anywhere from A to B, back and forth, but I'll put it in an A just because I enjoyed it more than the books below here. Next up, The Plague, B tier. Okay, this is another very unique book by Camus, and it has some parallels with plague and disaster in modern times, like even a little bit like a pandemic, and how society reacts to these long-term pandemics. The plague, obviously a pandemic, and how it changes society over time. And this is like very relevant in terms of what we went through. But the story is not written for that purpose. So this is about a plague, but not in the original older times, whenever the plague originally occurred. It's not that time period. It's a more modern time period, and the effects that it has on society and wear and tear of it all on how everybody behaves and thinks. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's very unique. All right, last up, we have the Martian Chronicles. Martian Chronicles, for me, is a B. I went back and forth, but this being a C, actually. But in the end, I enjoy it more than those on the C and as much as those on B. But, it gets beaten out by the ones above. It starts off really strong for me. The first 30 it's like a set of short stories all tied together. And I believe Bradbury might have written these and released them in magazines over time. I think I read that somewhere. I could be wrong. But the first 3 or 4 short stories got me, like, I was really into the book. I was super excited. If they were all like that, this would have been an S tier for me. But then everything kind of leveled off, and I was getting bored with it. And then in the end, it got interesting again for me. And between that, I mean, some of those fell down in this C range for me, but picked back up and finished stronger. And that's why I have it at B. It's just not consistently entertaining for me. And I know that it was very unique at the time it was written. It's a classic sci-fi that a lot of people love, and some people don't. It's kind of a middle of the road for me. That's the last one on my list. All right, so that's my ranking. 20 books. And now it's time to reveal, if I could only read one book out of this set, which one would it be? Tough pick. It obviously has to come from my S tier books. Standalone book, it would have been Dune. But I'm going to cheat here because the 3 books by Asimov, the Foundation series, they, as a group, really read as one book. And that would be the caveat, is if I could only have one book, but it's that series, books, obviously, as one story, that would be S tier for me. So Dune, if I can only pick one actual physical book, but really the Foundation series for me. And that is the rankings I did for last year. 20 books. I already finished another book and on to yet another. Since I put this list together, finished A Brave New World. And I think I'm going to start doing some really quick, no spoiler book reviews as I do these new reads. Maybe come back to some books I've already read, but again, I don't like doing reviews unless they're fresh off of reading them, so that everything is, easy to remember how I felt about the book. That fades pretty quickly for me. All right, so that's a wrap for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Who doesn't enjoy a tearing video? I know I've watched I don't know how many of them, and sometimes I'm like, why am I watching yet another one of these? I don't even like these books, but I just can't stop watching them. So if you like what you saw, give me a like, be one of the first subscribers. Want to get the channel off the ground, and that will help motivate me to make more videos and also keep me reading. So until next time, take care.